Imagine a day when you wake up feeling irritable, or as you stepped out, the world seemed unusually gray. Listeners, I know every day is a new day, and we often have a difference of emotions, that surround us. And today we are going to be talking about emotions with Nischal, the speaker for today. And welcome to We Are Listening, where we unravel the intricate dance of emotions and explore their profound impact on our lives. So, just before we start, I would like to introduce Nischal to you all. Meet Nischal Khurana, a seasoned leader with over 22 years of experience in top fashion and retail companies in India and abroad. Through his journey across leadership positions and his certifications in EQ, he has unraveled the complexities of emotions in the Indian work culture, striving to empower individuals and teams to thrive amidst the flux of emotions and demands of modern life. Welcome, Nischal.
Hey Pulkit, it's been a pleasure to be here, and I'm sure this conversation is going to be the best one that I've ever had. Yeah.
Totally looking forward to it. And Nischal, I just shared a scripted introduction of yours, but who is Nischal beyond this introduction that I just shared? So let's start with that.
So Pulkit, I've been into service industry like how most of us are, have worked for last 23 years.
Mhm.
And to be honest, who Nishal is, I could only discover it a couple of years back. And the
Okay.
reason I'm here at your podcast is only because I've discovered this person through this beautiful tool, which we call it as emotional intelligence. And since it made a lot of difference to me, I made it a purpose of my life. I mean, it's very exaggerated to say purpose of my life, but I would say it gave me a reason to feel alive. And it doesn't mean that I left my job, I left my career. No, that has a separate place. But who Nishal is that discovering who am I, and the realization that only after you discover your own self can you perform the way you really can in the best possible manner can only happen through the tool of EQ. And emotional intelligence has been a path breaker, has been a guide, or you can say a coach, a mentor to me in knowing myself. And they say that there are three parts of anyone's life journey: leading self, leading teams, and leading organizations. So unless you can lead yourself first in the best possible way, and that you are leading very well on that front, only then you can move towards leading teams, only then you can move towards leading your family, leading your relationships, and of course leading organizations. These are not the terms which we can talk about independently, that leading, I'm a leader leading organization. No, it cannot happen unless you lead your own self. So I think this Nishal has discovered himself in last 2 years. I did a leadership management course, I was introduced to this subject, and it really took the floor below my feet. I delved deeper into it. I started applying a lot of concepts to my own life, to my own professional careers. And I do not measure everything by the titles that you get. But yes, I did get compliments, I did get feedbacks, I did get encouragement that, what, we can see something happening within you. And I think I'm here to share all of that, all the wisdom that I've gained with you, Pulkit, and I'm sure it really inspires some people, and I hope it inspire people to actually take it up and know themselves better so that they can actually lead. They become the driver of their life. I do not want them to sit, I don't want them to hire a chauffeur and enjoy the car. I want them to drive their own car.
Nishal, somewhere they relate with what you just said, that emotions are often the driver of everybody's life out there, and seldom anybody understands it. Let alone they driving their emotions, it's their emotions driving them, and they don't even realize that it's their emotions that are driving them. If even I talk about my own personal self, it's been somewhere or the other recently after I've started doing these podcasts and I've started talking about mental health a lot. I have realized certain areas and I'm working on it personally. And there are days where I don't really like working, but yes, at the end you have to get up and you have to show up, and that's where you make a difference. You get into the driver's seat rather than being in the back seat and letting the emotions drive. So this brings me to my next question. What exactly is EQ all about, and how does it fit into the whole schema of different questions that define a human being. I have heard about adversity quotient coming into picture. I have heard about intelligence quotient coming into picture. I've heard about social quotient, and then EQ. These are the four questions I was introduced to in my starting of my journey of Aanya Wellness. So, what are your thoughts and how do you place EQ amongst the whole schema of different questions?
That's a great question, Pulkit. So, I'm a firm believer that articulation is a great way that you can actually have within you, and EQ is all about articulation, right?
Yep.
I can say about certain things in a certain way, and someone can say about the same thing in a certain way. Both could mean the same, but a person with high EQ will stand out. I'll give you a simple example that there are two chartered accountants, both have 20 years of experience, both working in the same firm. Let us assume both report to the same manager, right? But one of the chartered accountants has done extremely well in his life. He has a big bungalow, he has a car, he has everything that you give value to. And the other CA is still struggling within the team. He's still struggling to make his ends meet. And I think to understand that it is taken that your competence is there, that we know you're good at something. The final difference between these two individuals is only EQ. And since you asked how emotions play a role, this is all emotions playing out. And it's very difficult to understand it. How is it possible that two people working in the same place are actually performing in a altogether different manner and not getting the same results? But it is absolutely emotional intelligence into the play. Emotional intelligence was coined in 1990s by Daniel Goleman. It is not as old as 1990s. I believe emotional intelligence is as old as mankind. History of mankind is history of war. The war of Trojan lasted for 10 long years. War of Ramayana, Mahabharata, World War One, World War Two. We have this history of wars. And if history of world is history of wars, in every scenario that you study our history, there is emotional intelligence into play. One thing is very clear, that Daniel Goleman understood this concept and popularized it in 1990s. Now, we must articulate this well enough. What is the difference between intellect and emotional intelligence? What is IQ and what is EQ? Very subtle way of saying this, that IQ means I stand in a queue. You are always comparing yourself with someone else. There is always someone in front of you. You're always trying to imitate the other, and you are always trying to imitate the one that you are not. So IQ will always have a number. You have 100, he has 110. So you want to improve the balance 10 points and become equal to him. But do you want to be him? No. So IQ is that which is meant for survival. Yes, you need to have a higher IQ so that you can do a certain job better. Right? Once you have a certain amount of IQ, which is what I said, once you have a certain skill set which is very well developed, then IQ has no meaning, because your survival is done with. When we get up with certain emotions, when we get up with a certain heavy feeling, when we get up with a certain tiredness, we do not need IQ. We need to regulate our own emotions. We need to understand where is it coming from. And EQ is everything about understanding and managing our own emotions. Emotional intelligence is the tool which will help you interact with the outside world in an authentic, productive, meaningful manner. Only when you are authentic, only when you are productive, only when you are meaningful, will your interactions make a difference. And EQ is all about that. And emotions are an outcome of various past influences. Emotions are an outcome of your health. Emotions can be an outcome of the fact that you are not living the life in an authentic way. Emotions can be from various other reasons. But can you regulate your emotions, and do you understand your emotions? Or have you given too much importance to your emotions that you are actually letting your emotions follow your intellect? So that tool which can enable you to regulate your emotions and to interact with the outside world in a meaningful, authentic and productive manner is what emotional intelligence is all about. And IQ might need some data. See, intelligence always needs some data to perform. Once there is no data, intelligence will stop performing. But EQ doesn't need data. EQ only needs embrace. Once you embrace your emotions, the emotions will in turn embrace you. And only in this embracing, only in this developing your intuitiveness, only in this developing of your regulation techniques, will you be able to perform well in your life. In fact, Harvard research tells you that 85% of success in leadership positions are only attributed to EQ.
Nischal, this brings me to my next question on, you talked about emotional intelligence being in place for a very long time, and while it would be very too early for me to say this as an individual because I don't understand this particular, aspect of Mahabharata or depth of it. But I believe somewhere or the other, when we talk about, Gita being shared by Krishna to Arjun, that's also an instance of where the person is getting understanding of their own emotions, and then dharma comes into picture. Any thoughts around this?
So, Pulkit, that's very interesting. So, basically, what is Gita? And in fact, Gita comes from the word Geet, which means song of God, right?
Mhm.
Gita literally means song of God. And what Krishna is doing in Gita is that he is reciting the whole Gita in a very poetic way,
Okay.
right? Or you cannot explain romance with your loved one unless you sing a song. You can't be just very, objective in saying that, I love you or you love me. You can't be just very objective or a very corporatish explaining your love to other one, right? So Krishna is very well aware that this has to be poetic, there has to be some love in it, there has to be some romance in it, and that's why he is singing it out. He's singing it in a certain rhythm, and that's why it is called Gita. Now Gita is essentially a coaching conversation which is happening between Arjuna and Krishna, and it actually explains the whole concept of listening.
Okay.
It actually explains listening, which is basically the Maha Mantra of EQ. If you understand the whole concept of listening, you understand emotional intelligence. Right? There are many components, but I believe that is one thing which is very difficult to do. And what is happening in Mahabharata, the reason I say that EQ has been for a very long time before, you see both Arjuna and Krishna are facing the same situations, right? Arjuna has been to a situation where he is in the middle of a battlefield, and he is under that dilemma whether I should participate in this war, although he has committed to participate in the war. But on the first day of the war he is completely delusioned, and he's sitting in the middle of battlefield, and he tells Krishna to take him to the center of battlefield. While he's asking him to take him to the center of battlefield, he has no doubts. But as he faces his adversaries, who happen to be his family members, he starts shivering, his emotions starts taking over. He is not able to hold his Gandiva as it is written in Gita. He is not able to hold the bow and arrow in his hands. He is that weak. And he says that, and he gets out of his chariot and he sits at the back of the chariot. And he tells Krishna that, what, I can't do this. It's not happening, right? And Krishna is also facing the same situation. The whole of Mahabharata, Krishna's life has been a tragedy. In fact, if you see Ramayana, Ram's life has been a tragedy.
Yep.
What is one instance where you can say that Rama actually has lived for 1 year in a very kingship type of way? He was very happy. Their life has been complete tragedies. Krishna was born somewhere else, then he left his love, he left his family, then he kills Kansa, then he comes to a different state, and then, in fact, at the end of Mahabharata, his whole clan is destroyed.
Yes.
In fact, he is killed at the end because he cannot overcome being human. So the whole life of these people who we refer to, whether it is Krishna or Ram, has been tragedies. And what they are teaching you is that while they are facing all these situations, it is them who are taking control over the situation, and not situations taking control over them, not emotions taking control over them. In fact, Krishna always talks about taking emotions, not giving too much importance to emotions. While we teach EQ as a self-regulating tool, we say we should regulate our emotions. Krishna says that emotions have no meaning. Do not give too much importance to them. So the whole idea of emotional intelligence being that old is that these people like Krishna and Rama are actually demonstrating emotional intelligence by not reacting but responding to situations. While Krishna and Ram always have a smile on their face, whatever happens in their life, he calls it as Rang Bhumi. Why doesn't he call it as Ran Bhumi? He calls it as a playfield and not a battlefield, whereas Arjuna calls it as a battlefield. So for him it is a battlefield, but for him it is a playfield. He says, this is also a situation. Let us enjoy this situation. Let us go through it. Let us learn. This is going to be fun. So to be able to see situations that way is all about emotional intelligence. World War I, World War II is all about emotional intelligence if you go deeper into it. What Hitler was doing to others, it just tells you that, the human's desire to create is as much stronger as humans' desire to destroy.
Yep.
In fact, in mythology, we call it as the dance of Shiva, where the Tamru is destructive in his hand and the fire in his other hand is creative. So he wants to destroy what is not needed.
Yes.
And while he destroys that, he creates something which is needed, right? So EQ is all about understanding that human emotions are as strong and as destructive as it can be, and they can be as creative. So you better regulate them and be a creative force, whether in your life or in your team.
Amazing. And this sort of gets me to the point of self awareness. If I'm not wrong, self awareness can help you regulate your emotions and be more, aware of the actions that you're going to be taking.
Hmm.
So, what are your thoughts around that?
Absolutely, self-awareness is, one of the key parameters of emotional intelligence. And what self-awareness means is being aware of your own self. And to be honest, I believe, Pulkit, that that's the hardest tool to start with for emotional intelligence. When you decide on learning something new, it only comes from self-awareness. But do we think that everyone wants to learn something new every day? That's not the case. Not everyone is self-aware by their own nature, but there is a self-awareness in everyone which runs in their unconscious mind. The problem in self-awareness is to bring this unconscious to the conscious level. Sigmund Freud explains the Freudian model of personality, where he says 8/9 of your mind is actually unconscious and only 1/9 is conscious. Self-awareness only comes from there, and it's a difficult tool to adopt. If, to be honest, if I'm coaching someone, I will bring self-awareness as third or fourth step, but I'll start with simpler tools. But self-awareness is all about being aware, being attentive. The easiest way to build self-awareness is to pay attention to the other, to pay attention to life around you. Do not make it that complicated that you want to be self-aware and you are drowning yourself in those jargons that you lose the meaning of self-awareness, right? Being attentive to be able to listen to others is self-awareness. When someone is speaking to you, the simplest thing which I always tell my team is that when you are in meetings, when you are speaking to someone, keep your phone at least 2 meters away from you and listen to someone attentively. That act itself is the start of your self-awareness. The moment you start being attentive to life around you, the moment you are attentive to people around you, you will develop a lot of agility within you, and you will see that your curiosity will increase. You will tend to, when you're aware of your surroundings, when you're aware of your own self, you will start building a certain level of curiosity within you. That is the start of self-awareness. And self-awareness is a very key matrix for emotional intelligence. There are many components of emotional intelligence, self-awareness being one of them. At times, there are many other components which are falling much lower than self-awareness for some people. And therefore, we would always suggest that they work on other components first, the top two components which are making a lot of difference in their life, and then work on self-awareness.
Nischal, somewhere or the other, I believe expressions are also a way to be aware about your emotions or to talk about your emotions with others. And at times, as you mentioned some as part of our conversation, that authenticity is really much required when you are talking about being expressive out there. But with the world we are living in right now, it's totally in a manner where people are wearing facades that they're even not even they themselves are not aware of. So that's one component of self-awareness that's required, that people at times adapt and integrate certain traits of personalities which they don't realize, and that sort of their authentic self is something else that they believe personally, but what they're portraying outside to the world is a very different personality altogether. So how important do you feel that authenticity is there, and how do expressions have a role to play in it?
So emotions moves in 5 components, Pulkit. The first is self-perception, where we discussed about self-awareness, right? How do we perceive our own self, right? That's the moment we know, we learn how to perceive our own self. The next is how do we express? Now we know our own selves. Now it's time to express our own selves, and that is where comes self-expression. Now, the moment we have started learning to express, then it's time to build relationships. And therefore, from self-perception towards self-expression, we move to interpersonal skills. Now, once we have learned to perceive, once we have learned to express, and once we have moved to interpersonal skills, then it's time to take decisions. And therefore, the next component is decision-making component. And once we have learned how to make decisions, then it is time to manage your stress. Because the moment you take decisions, your stress levels will go up. That is how the biology of our mind is. I do not have a blackboard. I would have shown you how the limbic system works. So self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal decision making, and then stress management, right? Now, while the second component, which is self-expression, comes the concept of authenticity. What ancient India calls it as swadharma. But swadharma can only happen once you have finished your dharma. So the difference between legitimacy and authenticity is only the swa, which is my own self. So dharma is legitimacy, swadharma is authenticity, right? So the journey from dharma to swadharma is authenticity. But one has to be very careful and I'm telling this from my own experience, and I have seen that, and I was suffering from the same disease. What happens is that while you are authentic, you cannot be stubborn. I'll tell you how it happens. So, for example, if I'm an introvert and someone tells me that there is social networking event, and as a leader I must participate in social networking events, and the reason to participate in social networking events is to build your own perspective with people who are not working in your trade. Unless you speak to people outside your trade, you cannot learn much. You will only be what you are.
Yep.
Because 80% of the time you either spend with your family or at your workplace. So you will continue living your life like this, and by the time you are 60 or 70, you will only be what you have been. You cannot be what you have not been, right? How can you not be? You can only not be by attending events, social networking events, meeting people who are not into your trade, right? Only then you can understand the world better. But I am an introvert. If I go there and I sit silently on one corner because I cannot start my conversations, that will not be good. And if I speak more than what I should, right, I will be very unauthentic. Now tell me, what does authenticity mean here? Now, having decided to not go to an event, am I being authentic because I'm an introvert, or am I being stubborn? So authenticity always concerns about being our future self. Today I am this. What do I want to be in 2 years from now? What do I want to be in 2 months from now? What do I want to be in 6 months from now? That person you want to be is the real authentic self of you. So while you learn to express yourself, learn to be you, we should be very, very, very protective. We should not let our ego come in between and take the facade of being authentic that I cannot change. Authenticity is not telling you not to change, in simple terms. Authenticity is only being you. Now, you are not something now, but you want to be something in future, right? Only that's why we are here. We have that kind of consciousness that we want to expand every day, every moment. We want to be something better than what we are now. If we want something better than what we are now, we have to change. If we have to change, we must understand that our authentic self is the future self. How do we find that future self is the role of EQ. EQ will actually take you to that future self. And the whole 5 component, the circle, the container structure of EQ, which moves from perception to expression to interpersonal relations to decision making and to stress management, will automatically bring your authentic self. And in Hindi, we call it as dharma to swadharma. But only when you have finished your legitimate needs, which means you have got a job, you're able to run your family, you have paid up all your loans, right? Only when you have finished your legitimate acts can you move to swadharma. It would be a mistake to go to swadharma. In fact, you cannot go to swadharma before finishing your dharma, right? In fact, if you go to swadharma before finishing your dharma, you will actually come back. You will give up that again, right? But once you are done with dharma, the journey from legitimacy to authenticity is what it is all about. But be careful about the resistance to change that we all have.